Okay, so this tutorial is going to be for a neck warmer. This one's one that I bought because I didn't have a pattern for it, so I wanted to see, I needed something to model it after. This one's lined with fleece. I'm not going to line mine with fleece, I'm just going to do it out of wool. Okay, this is the yarn that I'm using. I really like this. It's 20% wool, 80% acrylic. I actually got this one at Hobby Lobby. It's Yarn Bee Dream Spun, so it's thicker than a normal worsted weight type yarn. This is the kind of pattern that I want to use for mine, so this is what I'm going to do. I tried this with double pointed needles, knitting in the round, but I just needed too many stitches on each needle and it was awkward. So instead I'm going to do it flat. I'm going to use this kind of needle instead. So this is a circular needle. This is a circular needle, and I like these better than the long flat needles just because I knit continental style and the long ones just get real heavy after a while. I also prefer bamboo because the yarn doesn't tend to slip off of it quite as much. It's pleasant on your hands too. Okay, so the first thing you always want to do is you have to cast on your yarn. I'm kind of assuming that you've done this before, but just in case. Okay, the first thing we have to do to cast on is we have to make a little slip knot in there. So you just kind of make a little loop, grab the long part like that. Then when you pull on it, it will tighten it up onto your needle, like this. Adjust this up slightly. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to put this on. So for mine, I counted from my little pattern hat that I had, and you could tighten it up with this one if you want. For my pattern hat, I counted that I needed 65. I'm going to do 75 stitches because I don't want it to be tight. What I did is I looked at this, and so I counted like 90 stitches on the other one, but it's a smaller yarn than I have. So what I did is I knitted kind of this pattern piece, and this pattern piece is 13 stitches across, and when I measured that, that was like 4.5 inches. And then what I did is I measured my head because it needs to slip over your head if it's going to be a neck warmer. And my head was like 22.5 inches, so 22 divided by 4.5, 22.5 divided by 4.5 gives you 5, so I needed 5 sets of this, which would have been 65. And to be on the safe side, I'm adding some stitches just because, you know, I don't want it to be tight. Okay, so to cast on, what you're going to do is I usually twist my yarn around my pinky finger, and normally I twist it twice around my index finger as I'm knitting, but for right now, I'm not knitting, I'm just casting on. So what you do is you make a little loop. So notice this kind of comes up like this and then goes down, and then I'm just going to slip this on. So see how it's kind of hanging off of my needle, and this passes behind it? That would be, so now I have 2 stitches on, including the one that I started with. So that's 2, and I do that again. 3, oops. First I drop it, then I do it again. That's 3, 4, 5. I just keep doing that until you have however many stitches you need. Okay. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 20. The nice thing about these circular needles is that you have, after a little while, you have your needle for a while and then it transitions to this wire. If you're making a big project like a sweater, you don't want to leave, like if you're going to not finish it in a day and you're going to leave it on for weeks or months, you don't want to leave your yarn just on a needle like this, because they get it takes on this round shape, so that when you continue on with your knitting, you're always going to have a puffed out row. But with these, since these are super skinny, if you have to walk away from your knitting for a while, you can always just slide it down onto that, and it doesn't stay puffed out. Now when you're ready to start again, you just move it back up. Okay, so that was 20. That's 30. So, and then as your needle gets full, you just slide it down a little bit. $40. That's 50. That's 60, so I'm almost there. $70. Theoretically, I need 5 more. I'm gonna make it an even number. I'm gonna go with 76. So I'll put 6 more stitches on. Okay. So now I have my stitches on there. So notice I have quite a few stitches on there. So now we're gonna turn it around and we're gonna start knitting. So on this one, what I did is, and I'll put the instructions down in the comments, it's really not much. So the first row, I did like 2 or 3 rows of just a knit stitch. And I turned it around, that becomes my little purl. Like, it could have the knit out front or you could have the purl, it doesn't matter. And then after that, what I did, this is just, I'll show you, but I'm just knitting, turning around, knitting, turning around. So basically I'm knitting both directions. And then I transitioned to a stockinette stitch for a while, which is knit one way, purl the other. And then I go back to the knit, 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 and then the stockinette stitch, and I just alternate those. Okay, so let's get this party started. I'm going to squish up my yarn a little bit closer to the front of my needle. This first row I'm just going to knit. I'm going to knit all the way across all the stuff that I cast on. Okay, so there are 2 stitches in knitting. One of them is called knitting and one of them is called purling. This one is knitting. Also, there are different ways of holding your needles. This is continental style. So notice that my yarn and my full needle are both in my left hand. My right hand is my working hand. So as I work stitches, they'll transfer to this. So for knitting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my loop. I'm going to grab my yarn from behind and I'm going to pull it through. Just like that. And then this one I'm going to slip off because it's now on this needle. So I'm going to do that again. I just put it like from the front to the back. I grab it and I pull it back to the front. And I slip it over. So starting from the front, I stab through, get it from the back, pull in, and over to the next needle. So I'm just going to do that all the way to till I run out of yarn. Or till I run out of loops on the row. So I just keep doing that. For those of you who, know how to knit already, all I'm basically doing is I'm just making a big long flat piece and then I'm going to sew it in half and make a tube, and that becomes my neck warmer. This gets easier the longer the piece becomes, because this is just your very first row, so nothing's really defined yet. So this next row all the way back, I'm going to purl. So that first row is knitting. This is now purling. So I'm purling, so I'm going to wrap it around my fingers again. So once around my pinky, twice around this finger. Now I'm going to pull the yarn up to the front. So in this case, before I was stabbing from the front to the back. Now I'm going to stab to the front and wrap it around and pull it through. So this is more of a back to front. Before it was a front to back. Okay, I'm going to do one more down and back with the stockinette stitch. Then we're going to do our first bubbly layer. Okay, so this is knit all the way down. Okay, so I've done 3 rows of knitting. I'm going to go ahead and start my little bubbly stitch. So what I'm going to do, instead of purling back this way, so if it were a stockinette stitch, I've got my knit on this side and I would purl on the other side. But in this case I don't want a stockinette stitch. I want it to look like this. See how I have like this funky horizontal ribbing? This is my stockinette stitch. So I already did that a couple rows, but I want it to look like this now. So to do that, instead of doing knitting one row, purling the other, I'm going to go knitting both ways, which is actually good for me because it goes faster. But it also looks cool. So here we go. So I'm going to do this particular way, like on this one, to get this look. I had 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs of rows. So down, back, down, back, down, back, down, back, and then I changed to the stockinette. Okay, so now I did my little 2 rows of stockinette stitch. So now I'm going to cast off. Okay, so the way we do this is I'm gonna do 2 stitches like I'm knitting. So I'm gonna knit this first one. Then I'm gonna knit the second one. Now I have two of them on this needle. I'm going to take this first one, I'm going to pull it over the second one so that I'm left with one stitch. Now I'm going to do it with the next one. So I knit one, and then I go here and I pull it over. See, so it's finishing it off like this. So I'm going to do that again. Slip it through, pull it over, one stitch. Knit it, pull it over. Knit it. We want to do it fairly loose. This needs to be kind of, we don't want it tight because this has to go over your head. Pull it over. I'm going to knit it. I'm going to pull it over. I'm going to knit it. I'm going to pull it over all the way down. See, it's finishing my edge off like this. So that way it's done. Keep going. We're going to do this all the way across. Keep your yarn kind of loose. Okay, so this is my finished thing. I finished off the edge up here. I have lots of string left over. So now it's just a long flat piece. I want to sew it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this long piece that I have left over and I'm going to sew it together like this. Usually I do this, sometimes I do it wrong side out. Usually I do it right side facing like this because then you can, the other stuff gets tucked inside. So I'm going to use my little needle. So I have my little, this is what I use, it's the little plastic kind of needle. So I'm going to put this in. And then, let me turn this around so I can start from this side. So I'm going to start right here. I'm going to go in through here. We could clean this up in a little while. But for right now, I'm just going to come through here. And then go through here again. So that's kind of like I normally would if I were tucking ends in. And then I'm going to just kind of go back and forth. Usually I try to do it in the middle of a stitch. Right now I'm just getting it started. So I'm gonna go in through there and through here. And basically I'm sewing it all the way just together. So I'm connecting up like rows. So it'll be sewn together like this. See, it's hard to see the difference. So we're just going to keep doing that all the way down. Going into the middle of stitches. So I try to find a middle of stitch somewhere. It's a little tricky on this one because it's so buckly, which is kind of good. So then we'll end up, most of our buckle is on the other side, or most of our seam. So we're going to do that all the way down. This is a whole lot easier if it's just stockinette stitch, because then you go into the middle of each stitch. It's easier. Okay. So now we're getting into a stockinette row. So I go in between this stitch, like into the middle of it, and then I come over here and I'm gonna go, it's probably into the middle of it here. And I'll go into the middle of this one. And it kind of pulls them together and makes them look like one stitch if you do it right, which I may not be doing it right. It's been a while. I try to do things seamless whenever possible. So I'm just gonna sew here. Sew here. Sew here. See, so it's like, it's pretty smooth. It's not terrible. I don't totally care because it's a neck warmer, so this part's probably going to be under my hair anyway. Okay. So go into here. I'm just going to keep doing this all the way down. See? So I keep doing this. Probably didn't need quite this much yarn, but you don't want to get to the like halfway through it and discover that you need more yarn. That's never a good feeling. So better too much than not enough. Okay. Now if you really want it to not have a seam, the easiest way is to just knit it in the round. This one, the yarn's kind of too thick to be comfortable on the double-ended needles. But I suppose you could do more than 4, or you could make your own. Okay. So that is our finished thing. This is a neck warmer. So if we look at it this way, this would be the front. Should be cozy. So now all we have to do now is we just have to take all of our loose ends and weave them in. So we have several where I changed skeins. So I ran out of yarn, so I put more in. So now we just gotta weave these in. So I would start by doing this a little bit. And then generally I do this on the wrong side. That way I can weave them in and you can't tell that it's there. So like this. Since this is the end of it, I might tie it off somewhere. So what I'm doing here, is I'm following the pattern of where the string would go. So this would go through this one, up through this one, down through this one, back through this one, like that. So I'm basically tracing the pattern of it, because then you won't be able to see. So it goes up through this one, and then see it goes around through here and back down through here. So I go like this. So you can't tell that I'm weaving in, it just kind of disappears. So then it goes up through this one, back through the one it just came through. And then down through this one, back through that one that it just came through. And I keep doing that. It literally disappears into the weave. See? You can't even tell I was weaving it in. Ta-da! So I'm going to do that with all of these, and that's my finished product. Yay!